For most of his life, he was taught that his value came from what he could give. Give your time, give your effort, give your love, prove you're worthy through how much you endure. And so, he did. He worked harder, stayed later, tried longer. He became the reliable one, the man everyone could count on, the man who never said no, the man who believed that love was something you earned through sacrifice. But somewhere along the line, something broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. A silence that started in his chest, the kind that doesn't ask permission, the kind that feels like truth. He realized that no matter how much he gave, it was never enough. No matter how much he explained, it was never heard. No matter how much he proved, it was never seen. And in that silence, he discovered something that no one ever taught him. Peace feels better than being understood. Because the moment a man realizes his worth, he stops begging the world to see it. That's the shift. Not anger, not revenge, awareness. He starts to notice how often he was talked over, dismissed, used. How much of his energy went to proving his value to people who only loved him when he was useful. How much of his confidence was built on acceptance from those who never accepted themselves. He sees how deeply he confused being needed with being loved. And that's when everything starts to change. He stops over-explaining. He stops chasing closure. He stops showing up for people who never showed up for him. And for the first time in his life, the silence doesn't feel empty. It feels sacred. Because the man who knows his worth no longer fights to be chosen. He chooses himself. He learns that detachment isn't cold, it's clarity. That saying no isn't rejection, it's protection. That walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. And the people who once drained him, they start to feel it. They sense his energy shift. The way his eyes no longer plead to be understood. The way his presence no longer bends to keep the peace. The way his calm has weight now. He doesn't demand respect. He simply moves like a man who already has it. That's what happens when a man wakes up. When he stops performing for a world that profits off his exhaustion. When he stops mistaking his ability to endure for proof that he's enough. Because the truth is, he always was. And once a man realizes that, there's no going back. The approval he used to crave loses its flavor. The attention he once chased feels cheap. And peace, that quiet, unshakable peace, bikuangti say, kawati for him. Every man pays a price for the version of himself he had to become just to be accepted. He learns early that love has conditions. Be useful, be reliable, be strong, be available. And if he's all those things, maybe, just maybe, he'll be enough. So, he plays the role. He becomes the provider, the protector, the problem solver. He carries burdens no one sees, hides pain no one asks about, and keeps showing up, even when his spirit is exhausted. Because he believes that's what good men do. He learns to measure his worth by how much weight he can carry for others, by how much he can fix, by how much he can give. And every time someone takes him for granted, he tells himself it's fine. That real strength means staying quiet. But strength without boundaries becomes slavery. The world keeps taking. People keep expecting. And somewhere along the line, he forgets what he even looks like when he's not saving someone else. He doesn't laugh the same. He doesn't rest the same. He doesn't even dream the same. Because the man who gives everything eventually loses the one thing that made him whole. Himself. You can see it in his eyes. The distance. The dullness. Like a fire that once burned bright, but now only flickers under the weight of responsibility. He's alive, but he's not living. He's surrounded by people, but no one truly sees him. And when he does finally speak up, they call him selfish. When he asks for peace, they say he's cold. When he pulls away, they call him distant. because no one notices how much they took until the giver finally stops giving. This is the cost of forgetting himself. Believing that love means losing your identity, that care means self-erasure, that peace is something you have to earn through pain. But what no one tells him is that the world doesn't respect endless sacrifice. It exploits it. The more he bends, the less they value him. The more he explains, the less they listen. The more he proves himself, the less they believe him. Until one day, something inside him breaks, quietly but completely. And for the first time, he stops asking, "What more can I do for them?" and starts asking, "What happened to me?" That question changes everything. Because once a man realizes that his constant giving is the reason he's empty, he begins to see that peace was never something others could offer. It was something he was taught to abandon. And now, he's ready to take it back. It doesn't happen in a loud moment of anger. It happens in quiet, when the noise of obligation finally fades and he can hear his own thoughts again. He's sitting alone, maybe in his car, maybe in his room, maybe at the edge of a long day. And for the first time in years, he's not trying to fix anything. He's just still. That's when it hits him. All the things he thought he was doing for love were actually ways he was trying to earn it. All the giving, all the proving, all the holding it together. Not because he wanted to, but because he was terrified of what would happen if he didn't. But now he's too tired to keep pretending. He looks around at the life he built and realizes something sobering. He built it for everyone but himself. He was the foundation for people who never looked down to see what was holding them up. He was the reason things stayed stable, but no one ever noticed the cracks forming beneath his feet. And in that moment, clarity hits like a slow sunrise. Not blinding, not sudden, just warm enough to see the truth for what it is. He realizes peace isn't found in being understood. It's found in not needing to be. He realizes love that demands proof isn't love. It's dependency dressed as devotion. He realizes that the approval he chased wasn't respect. It was control. And for the first time, he feels something unfamiliar. Detachment. Not the kind born from bitterness, but from understanding. He finally sees that not everyone deserves his energy, that not every argument requires a response, that not every connection deserves to be saved. He's no longer angry. He's awake. Because when a man reaches clarity, the noise of the world loses its power over him. He no longer needs to prove he's a good man. He knows he is. He no longer needs to be chosen. He chooses himself. He no longer fears being alone, because solitude no longer feels like punishment. It feels like freedom. The same silence that once haunted him now feels like peace. The same people who once drained him now feel distant. Not because he hates them, but because he finally sees them clearly. He realizes that everything he was searching for, respect, love, purpose, was waiting on the other side of letting go. Because peace doesn't come when life gets easy. It comes when you stop confusing suffering with strength. And that's the moment of clarity, when a man stops fighting to be seen and starts living as if he already is. When a man changes, the world around him trembles. Not because he's louder, but because he's quieter. See, for years, they've known him as the man who bends, the man who always listens, always fixes, always forgives, the dependable one, the calm one, the one who keeps the peace, even when it costs him his own. But the moment he stops, the moment he chooses silence over explanation, distance over drama, peace over performance, people start to panic. Because his stillness exposes everything they've built on his compliance. The woman who used to test his patience now feels her power slipping. The friends who only called when they needed something start to notice his absence. The family who depended on his constant yes feels the weight of his new no. They say he's changed, that he's cold now, detached, arrogant. But the truth is, he's just done bleeding for people who mistake his kindness for obligation. He doesn't chase validation anymore, so those who fed off his effort begin to starve. And that's when the manipulation begins. The guilt trips, the backhanded comments, the emotional bait. Why are you so distant lately? You've become so selfish. You used to care. But he sees it for what it is. Control disguised as concern. Because the world doesn't celebrate a man who wakes up. It fears him. A man who realizes his worth becomes unpredictable. He can't be guilted, pressured, or controlled. His time has value. His words have weight. His silence has meaning. And that terrifies people who built their comfort around his compliance. Women who once thrived on his attention now feel its absence like withdrawal. They start chasing the calm they once mocked, because deep down they know the man who doesn't need validation is the only one truly free. He doesn't argue to be right anymore. He doesn't defend his peace. He simply protects it. And as he pulls back, the world reveals itself, who valued him and who valued what he could do for them. That's the beauty of detachment. It doesn't destroy real connections. It exposes the false ones. People fall away. Silence grows. And in that space, he finds something he hasn't felt in years. Clarity. He realizes the ones who truly cared never needed to be convinced. They stood beside him quietly. They respected his distance because they understood his healing. The rest? They fade into the background, just noise he finally learned to tune out. And as the world adjusts to his new energy, he smiles, not out of pride, but out of peace. Because the man who realizes his worth doesn't lose people. He simply loses illusions. Stillness. It's not something most men are taught. They're taught to act, to fix, to fight, to do, but never to be. So when a man finally learns stillness, it feels unnatural at first, like holding his breath in a world addicted to noise. Yet over time, he realizes something profound. Stillness is not the absence of strength, it's the evolution of it. Because silence is not submission, it's self-control, and peace is not weakness, it's power that no one else can touch. When he used to argue, people called him emotional. When he used to explain, they dismissed him. When he used to give, they took. Now he says nothing, and suddenly they listen. That's the irony of stillness. It's louder than shouting, more unsettling than anger, and more commanding than force. When a man becomes still, he becomes unreadable. And in a world built on reaction, that makes him dangerous. He no longer moves from emotion. He moves from intention. Every word, every action, every silence is deliberate. He's not driven by the need to prove himself, but by the desire to protect his peace. And that's what people can't understand. His calm is not indifference. It's mastery. He's learned that energy is currency, and not everyone deserves a transaction. He used to pour himself into every conflict, trying to fix people who were committed to misunderstanding him. Now, he just observes. He watches patterns instead of words, behavior instead of promises. And when someone shows him who they are, he believes them, quietly, gracefully, permanently. His absence becomes his boundary. His peace becomes his statement. His stillness becomes his power. Because you can't manipulate a man who no longer reacts. You can't control someone who doesn't seek approval. And you can't drain a man who's learned to guard his attention. That's when everything changes. His relationships, his energy, his purpose. The same world that once tried to exhaust him now wonders how he became so unshakable. He doesn't explain. He doesn't brag. He just moves differently. And in that movement, slow, intentional, centered, he starts to attract what aligns with his peace and naturally repel what threatens it. That's the real power of stillness. It doesn't chase. It chooses. And the man who chooses from peace instead of pain becomes untouchable on psyche. Not because he's hard, but because he's whole. The world once mistook his quiet for weakness. Now it recognizes it as strength. Because stillness, when it comes from awareness, isn't silence at all. It's control. Something changes in a man when he starts to respect himself again. It's not pride. It's not ego. It's a quiet shift, like gravity finally pulling him back to his center. He wakes up one morning and realizes he doesn't feel tired anymore. Not because life got easier, but because he finally stopped fighting battles that didn't matter. He starts rebuilding, not for revenge, not to prove anyone wrong, but because he owes it to himself to see what happens when he stops settling. The gym becomes therapy. Discipline becomes freedom. Silence becomes strength. He starts setting goals again, the kind he abandoned while chasing validation. He starts saying no, not out of anger, but out of clarity. Every boundary he draws adds a brick back to the foundation of his identity. And with each act of self-respect, the world begins to respond differently. People who once took him for granted grow uncomfortable, because the man they could guilt, shame, or manipulate no longer exists. He doesn't explain his choices anymore. He doesn't seek permission. He simply lives by a new rule. If it costs my peace, it's too expensive. That's what self-respect really is. Remembering your value without needing anyone else to confirm it. He learns that loyalty means nothing without reciprocity. That giving everything to people who give nothing back is not noble. It's self-betrayal. And he refuses to betray himself again. Now his focus shifts inward. He invests in his body, his purpose, his future. The noise of the world fades into the background, replaced by the rhythm of progress, the quiet satisfaction of growth. He no longer needs attention. He commands it through presence. He no longer begs to be chosen. He becomes the kind of man worth choosing. He no longer chases peace. He lives in it. And here's the irony. The same people who once ignored him now want to know his secret. What changed? How did he become so calm, so confident, so sure? The answer is simple. He stopped negotiating his value. Because when a man realizes his worth, he doesn't become arrogant. He becomes focused. He doesn't become bitter. He becomes selective. He doesn't become unavailable. He becomes intentional. Every part of his life begins to align. Work, health, relationships, purpose. Because his energy is finally his own again. He understands now that peace isn't found in being loved by everyone. It's found in respecting yourself enough to walk away from anything that makes you forget who you are. That's what happens when a man comes home to himself. He stops trying to prove his value and starts living it.